You know, sometimes power doesn't collapse with gunfire, it fades quietly through a bank transfer. That's what recently stunned Nigeria, when investigators reportedly uncovered 11 billion sitting in the accounts of a senior military officer accused of misconduct and alleged involvement in activities against the state. 11 billion Nigerian nairas. The number alone felt heavier than any bombshell, not only for what it represented, but for who it implicated. Military ranks, political circles, and financial networks all intertwined in one web of power and suspicion. But this isn't just another African scandal. No, this is a story about a continent catching its own shadows before outsiders define its failures. A story of accountability, sovereignty, and a nation learning to protect itself. Sometimes nations don't fall with explosions, they unravel quietly, through decimals and transactions. That's how Nigerians woke up one morning to headlines about a colonel, not a businessman, not a politician reportedly holding more than 11 billion Nigerian nairas, or about $7 million across local accounts. The revelation stunned the public. The funds were linked, according to early reports, to investigations into an alleged plan targeting President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration. The discovery didn't just raise eyebrows, it froze the nation. Many asked, again, another coup plot? Another betrayal? But this time, something felt different. Because this wasn't chaos. It was calculated, a story of signals, surveillance, and silent investigation. Military intelligence had reportedly been monitoring a group of suspects since August 2024, tracking communication trails, phone records, and bank movements. This wasn't a reaction to gossip, it was a months-long surveillance effort. The alleged plotters, according to reports, had chosen symbolic dates: June 12th, Nigeria's Democracy Day, and October 1st, Independence Day. Those are days of national unity and pride, which makes the alleged plan even more unsettling. But the twist wasn't just what was found, it was who. The colonel in question wasn't a rogue rebel. He was a decorated officer, well-trained, widely respected, the kind of person you'd never suspect. That's what made the discovery feel so personal. Because when trust is betrayed from within, the shock hits deeper. 11 billion Nigerian nairas doesn't appear overnight. It's not pocket change. It suggests a network: approvals, permissions, and partnerships. This is how high-level corruption works: quietly, politely, and with paperwork. But here's where the story turns hopeful. Nigeria's own institutions uncovered it. No foreign tip-offs. No outside pressure. Just a homegrown investigation. That's not a sign of failure. That's a sign of progress, a country beginning to self-correct and take responsibility. Because sometimes the real threat isn't a coup with guns, it's the quiet one happening inside the books and the banks. What drives a trained officer, sworn to protect the nation, to risk everything? It's not always greed. Sometimes it's frustration, disillusionment, or the slow corruption of privilege. According to reports, the colonel's sudden wealth, new homes, cars, and unexplained transactions triggered the first alarms. It's a familiar African story. Public office meets private opportunity. Defense budgets turn into business ventures. Loyalty turns into a transaction. But this case was unusually large. The 11 billion Nigerian nairas trail led to shell companies, fake consultancy firms, and offshore accounts. Behind it, a familiar pattern links to political figures, business partners, and a network of influence that blurs the line between service and self-interest. In post-colonial Africa, politics and the military have often been intertwined. Many politicians rely on soldiers for loyalty, and many soldiers depend on politicians for access and status. So modern coups don't always begin in barracks. Sometimes, they start in boardrooms disguised as projects or consultancy. Gone are the days of loud revolts. Today's conflicts are financial, digital, and psychological. The line between patriotism and ambition is thinner than ever. To understand this, you have to go back to history. The African military, as designed under colonial rule, wasn't meant to protect the people, it was meant to protect the system. That system valued obedience over integrity. And unfortunately, some of that mindset still lingers. So when you hear about scandals like this, remember, they're not just stories of individuals. They're reflections of old institutions still unlearning old habits. Here's the part many miss. This discovery wasn't made by outsiders. It was Nigerian institutions working quietly, professionally, that exposed it. That's governance evolving. That's sovereignty in action. For decades, Africa has been portrayed as a continent that can't clean its own house. But now, it's beginning to do just that, through local journalists, intelligence officers, and courts. That's not weakness. That's maturity. But, of course, once the story reached international media, some headlines focused on instability, not accountability. When France has protests, it's civil unrest. When Kenya has protests, it's tribal tension. When Italy changes governments, it's political volatility. When an African country does the same, it's instability. That double standard still shapes global perception, and perception shapes policy, aid, and respect. But times are changing. African media platforms like Sahara Reporters, Africa News, and others are breaking their own stories and setting their own narratives. The continent is learning to own its truth, not rent it from foreign commentators. Because maybe the real battle isn't just against corruption. Maybe it's about who gets to tell Africa's story. Every time Africa cleans its house, the world shouldn't call it chaos, it should call it growth. Nigeria's investigation shows that the continent is learning to protect its institutions, its democracy, and its people from within. Right now, more than 30 individuals, including military personnel and civilians, are reportedly under investigation. The process is ongoing, and Nigerians are watching closely. There's a new kind of civic energy, one that demands transparency and refuses silence. But exposure alone isn't enough. Real progress requires moral infrastructure systems that value ethics as much as efficiency. Imagine military academies where cadets not only learn warfare but also ethics, African history, and public service. Imagine leaders rewarded not for loyalty to power, but for loyalty to principle. That's the kind of reprogramming Africa needs, not a change of governments, but a change of mindset. Because the real revolution isn't happening in the streets. It's happening in the African consciousness, a quiet awakening against dependency and inferiority. The Colonel's case will fade in time. But what matters most is what comes after. Will Africa keep patching the wounds, or start rebuilding the body? Because maybe, just maybe, the continent isn't breaking down. It's breaking through. It's shedding an old skin. And beneath it, a stronger, more self-aware Africa is finally beginning to breathe. So, what would you do if you found out loyalty in your country could be bought with money? Do you think Africa's biggest battle today is against corruption? Or against perception? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to explore more about Black history, African civilization, and modern leadership, subscribe to African Lights, where stories are told with truth, respect, and pride. Thanks for watching, and remember, Africa isn't falling apart. It's finally becoming.